living like it's the Great Depression for 30 days. Everything. That was the challenge I gave myself. No, seriously, I'm going full 1930s. I'm talking about the era when people reused tea bags, darned their socks until there was more darned than sock, and considered a chicken in every pot an aspirational luxury. But before you think this is going to be some romanticized, simpler times, nostalgia trip, let me be clear. The Great Depression wasn't quaint. It was brutal. People were genuinely starving. Families lost everything. This isn't about pretending that was fun or noble. This is about examining the extreme frugality practices that people used to survive genuine economic collapse, and asking, which of these tactics could actually help us in 2025? Which ones are outdated and useless? And which ones reveal how absurdly wasteful we've become? Here's what got me thinking about this. I was complaining about inflation and grocery prices, and my 87-year-old neighbor who actually lived through the Depression as a kid looked at me like I'd grown a second head. She said, "You throw away more food in a week than my family ate in a month." That stung, because she was right. So I decided to spend 30 days living by actual Great Depression-era budgeting and household management practices. I researched 1930s homemaking guides, interviewed people who lived through that era, and compiled a list of the most common frugality tactics from that time. The rules. For 30 days, I'm living by 1930s standards for everything related to household management and spending. I'm not giving up electricity or indoor plumbing. I'm not a masochist, but I am adopting every Depression-era frugality practice I can find. This means making everything from scratch, repairing instead of replacing, reusing everything until it literally disintegrates, wasting absolutely nothing, planning every purchase like it's a family investment, finding free entertainment and resources. I tracked every penny, documented every practice, and I'm going to show you what worked, what was miserable, and what genuinely shocked me about how wasteful we've become. Let me walk you through the practices, week by week, because this got wild fast. The 1930s frugality playbook first. I needed to understand the actual practices. These aren't things I made up. These are documented tactics from Depression-era homemaking guides, oral histories, and interviews with people who lived through it. The core practices. 1. They use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without philosophy. This was the actual slogan from the era. Nothing got thrown away unless it was completely, utterly, beyond all repair destroyed. And, Eben 10, you saved it for parts. 2. Soap saving people saved every soap sliver, pressed them together into new bars. They made their own soap from cooking grease. They used far less soap than we do now, because soap costs money. 3. Food waste was unthinkable. Every vegetable scrap went into soup stock. Stale bread became bread pudding or croutons. Meat was stretched with fillers. Nothing edible went in the trash. Ever. 4. Mending over replacing clothes got repaired until they literally fell apart. Then they became quilts, rags, or stuffing. Socks got darned. Buttons got saved and reused. Zippers got transplanted from garment to garment. 5. Depression era meals. Meals were based on the cheapest possible ingredients. Beans, rice, potatoes, flour, seasonal vegetables. Meat was rare and stretched as far as possible. A single chicken would provide multiple meals. 6. Homemade everything bread. Soap, cleaning supplies, closed when possible. If you could make it yourself, you did. Buying ready-made was for wealthy people. 7. Bartering and community resources. People traded skills and goods, used the library extensively, shared tools and resources, community gardens. Nothing was too small to trade. 8. Entertainment was free. Radio if you had one. Reading, games, socializing, walking. Nature entertainment that cost money was off the table. Now let me show you what happened when I actually tried to live this way in 2025. Week 1, the reality hits. Day 1 to 3. The kitchen becomes a factory. I started by making bread from scratch. Seems simple, right? It took me 3 attempts to make bread that was actually edible. Modern yeast is different from 1930s yeast. My kitchen was a disaster. Flour everywhere. But here is what I learned. A loaf of homemade bread costs about 60 cents in ingredients versus $3.50 for store-bought. If I made bread 3 times a week, that's over $450 saved per year. Time investment, about 20 minutes of active work plus waiting for it to rise. Not nothing, but not impossible. Then I made soap. Actual soap from cooking grease, saved from previous meals, lye, and water. This was disgusting. My apartment smelled like a rendering plant, but I made 12 bars of soap for approximately $2 in materials. Store-bought soap costs me about $4 per bar. I just made $46 worth of soap for $2. The smell was temporary. The savings were real. Day 4 to 5. The food waste audit. I started saving every food scrap. Vegetable peels, meat bones, bread heels, everything. In 2 days, I had enough scraps to make a huge pot of vegetable stock. That stock became the base for 3 different meals. Soup, rice, cooked in stock instead of water, braised chicken. I'd been throwing away approximately 30% of the food value I was buying. I also started a refrigerator soup system. Every leftover, every vegetable that was starting to wilt, everything went into a perpetual soup that I kept adding to. It sounds gross. It was actually delicious and wasted nothing. Day 6 to 7. The clothing repair project, I took inventory of everything that needed mending. Missing buttons, small tears, loose hems. I had 14 items that needed repair. In 2025, I would have either ignored these until the item was unwearable or just bought new clothes. Instead, I spent a Sunday afternoon mending everything. Cost of repairs, $0. I used thread and buttons I already had. Value of clothes saved, approximately $300 if I'd replaced them. Week 1 results, money saved. $47 on food, $44 on soap, $300 in prevented clothing purchases. Time invested about 12 hours. Biggest surprise, how much usable value I'd been throwing away. Biggest challenge. The time requirement felt overwhelming. Week 2. Getting weird with it. The soap slivers project. I started collecting soap slivers, those tiny pieces that are too small to use comfortably. In the 1930s, people saved these and pressed them together to make new bars. I collected slivers for a week, got them wet, and pressed them into a mold. An old soap container. It worked. I made a Frankenstein soap bar that looked terrible but functioned perfectly. This is objectively insane in 2025. I can buy soap, but it worked, and I haven't bought new soap in 2 weeks. Depressing era meals, I committed to making only dishes that would have been common in the 1930s. Beans and cornbread. Cost per meal, $0.8, $5. Potato soup with stale bread, cost per meal, $0.6. Depression breakfast, which is literally just milk toast, cost per meal, $0.3. Egg and rice. Casserole, cost per meal, and $2. Lentil loaf. Meat substitute, cost per meal, $0.95. My normal food spending, $12.15 per day. Depression era meal spending, $3 to $4 per day. The food wasn't gourmet, but it was filling, reasonably nutritious, and cost to boot 75% less than my normal diet. The learning experiment, I had 3 pairs of socks with holes. In 2025, I'd throw them away and buy new socks. Instead, I learned to darn them. Darning is basically weaving new fabric across the hole. It took me 45 minutes per socket. Would have taken someone experienced about 10 minutes. The darned sections are visible and slightly scratchy, but the socks are functional. I saved $18 on new socks and learned a skill I didn't know existed. The entertainment drought. No streaming services. No going out. No buying books or games. Entertainment had to be free. Library. I checked out 4 books and 2 movies. Free. Parks. I went hiking 3 times. Free. Social. I hosted a game night with games. I already owned. Free. Radio. I discovered there are still free radio stations. Free. My normal entertainment spending. $120 month week to entertainment spending. $0. I was bored at times, but I also read more in 1 week than I'd read in the previous 3 months. Week 2 results. Money saved. Approximately $180 on food, entertainment, and prevented purchases. Time invested. About 15 hours. Biggest surprise. Free entertainment is actually everywhere if you look. Biggest challenge. Social isolation from not going out week 3 to 4. The deep depression, week 3. The psychological wall by week 3. I hit a wall. Not a financial wall, a psychological one. Everything took so much time. Making bread, cooking from scratch, mending clothes, saving soap slivers. I felt like I was working a second job called extreme frugality. I started understanding why the 1930s housewife role was considered a full-time job. It was a full-time job. Everything we now buy ready-made used to require hours of labor. The barter experiment, I needed a knife sharpened. In 2025, I'd buy a new knife or pay someone $15 to sharpen it. Instead, I posted in a local community group offering to bake bread in exchange for knife sharpening. Someone responded within an hour. They sharpened 3 knives. I gave them 2 loaves of homemade bread. Both of us saved money. Both of us got something we needed. This blew my mind. The barter economy still works. We've just forgotten it exists. The absolute zero waste challenge. Week 3 was when I went full zero. Every single thing that came into my house had to be completely used. Coffee grounds gives compost, which I gave to a neighbor with a garden, vegetable scraps, stock, meat bones, stock, then given to neighbor's dog. Paper gives fire starter for a friend with fireplace. Glass jars gives storage containers. Cardboard given to friend who is moving. Every leftover gives refrigerator soup, or frozen 4. Later at the end of the week, I took out 1 small bag of actual trash. 1 bag. My normal weekly trash output is 4 large bags. I've been wasting approximately 75% of what came into my house. Week 4. The final push by week 4. Some practices had become habits. I automatically saved food scraps for stock. I checked my mending pile before considering new purchases. I looked for free entertainment. First I made bread without thinking about it, but other practices felt unsustainable. Making soap is not practical for modern life. Depression-era meals were getting repetitive and depressing. The time investment was still massive. The final week experiments. I pushed even further. Stretching meat. I bought 1 whole chicken, $8, and made it last for 7 meals. Roasted chicken for dinner, served 2 meals with lots of vegetables. Chicken salad from leftovers to meals. Soup from the carcass 3 meals. This is $1.14 per meal for protein. The make-do philosophy. My coffee maker broke. Instead of buying a new one, $30, I made coffee in a pot on the stove using a method from the 1930s. It worked. It wasn't convenient, but it worked. Free social activities. I organized a potluck using only food people already had. A book. A book. A book. A skills exchange. Someone taught me to sharpen knives. I taught them to bake bread. Week 3 to 4 results. Money saved. Approximately $380. Time invested. About 25 hours. Biggest surprise. Community bartering still works beautifully. Biggest challenge. The time cost was unsustainable with a full-time job. What actually works in 2025 after 30 days of living like it's 1930? Here's what I learned. Practices worth keeping. 1. Zero food waste. This is non-negotiable. I was throwing away 30% of my food budget. Making stock from scraps. Using everything. Planning meals around what needs to be used. Biz alone saves $150 plus per month. 2. The 30-day repair rule. Before buying anything new, try to repair what you have. I saved over $300 in prevented purchases just by mending clothes and fixing broken items. 3. Baking bread once you get the hang of it. Homemade bread costs 83% less and tastes better. It's not practical daily, but even once a week adds up. 4. Community resources. Libraries are insane. Free books, movies, internet, sometimes even tools and equipment. I saved $120 on entertainment by remembering libraries exist. 5. Bartering. The barter economy is alive if you look for it. Skills exchange, goods exchange, service exchange. It works and builds community. Practices that don't work. 1. Making soap just by soap. The time and smell aren't worth the $2 savings. This is false economy in 2025. 2. Darning socks. Socks are cheap. Your time is valuable. Just buy new socks when they wear out. Some 1930s practices don't translate. 3. Depression era. Meals daily. Eating like it's 1930 every day is depressing, pun intended. But incorporating some cheap, simple meals into rotations saves significant money without being miserable. 4. Refusing all convenience. The 1930s didn't have the time-saving conveniences we have because they didn't exist. Using zero convenience items means you need 1930s amounts of time, which you wouldn't have if you work a modern job. The real lesson. The Great Depression generation wasn't frugal because they were morally superior or more disciplined. They were frugal because they had no choice. Every penny literally mattered for survival. We have choices. They didn't have, but we've swung so far toward convenience and consumption that we've forgotten some genuinely useful practices. When the numbers, everything. Normal monthly spending on food, household items. Entertainment, $85,030. Day Depression era, spending $320 money saved. $530, but time invested approximately 65 hours. That's $8.15 per hour for the time invested. In some ways, that's not great pay for labor. In other words, I learned skills, reduced waste, and reconnected with practices that our grandparents knew were essential. What I'm keeping? 0 food waste practices, making bread weekly, repair before replace philosophy, using library resources, community bartering when possible. Much more conscious consumption, what I'm abandoning. Making soap, ridiculous time investment, darning socks, not worth it. Depression era meals as staples, too depressing. Extreme time investments that don't scale. Here's the thing about extreme budgeting by 19 standards. It works. You absolutely can live on a fraction of what we normally spend, but it requires trading money for time in ways that don't always make sense in 2025. The value isn't in perfectly replicating Depression-era life. The value is in recognizing how wasteful we've become and selectively adopting practices that actually make sense. The 3 big realizations. 1. We waste an obscene amount of food, money, and resources because convenience has made us forget that things have value. A 1930s household would have been horrified by what the average 2025 household throws away. 2. Community and bartering are powerful resources we've abandoned in favor of just buying everything individually. Rediscovering these practices saves money and builds relationships. 3. Time versus money is a real trade-off. An extreme frugality requires extreme time. You can't work a 40-hour week and maintain 1930s household practices. Something has to give. The challenge. Pick one Depression era. Practice to try for a month. 0 food waste. Baking your own bread. Repair before replace. Using only library resources for entertainment. 1 barter exchange document. What you save and what it costs in time. See if it's worth it for your life. Drop a comment. Which Depression-era frugality practice would you actually try? Or if you're older and remember these practices, tell me what I got wrong or what I missed. If this video made you think differently about waste and frugality, hit the like button and share it. We don't need to live like it's 1930, but we could learn something from people who had no choice but to waste nothing. I saved $530 in 30 days, but more importantly, I stopped taking for granted that I can just buy my way out of every problem. That's a lesson worth more than money. The Great Depression was a tragedy, but the practices people used to survive, some of them are genuinely valuable, even when you don't need them to survive. That's the difference between extreme budgeting and just extreme